So I just wanted to start out reading from this couple of books here. This first one called Slavery as it relates to the Negro or African race, examined in the light of circumstances, history, and the Holy Scriptures, with an account of the origin of the black man's color, causes of his state of servitude, and traces of his character, as well in ancient as in modern times, with strictures on abolitionism. Alright, so this was written in 1843. Just want to read here. It says, let's start from here, this part. In accordance with this statement of Josephus, in rendering a reason why God called the two first human beings by but one name, and that name being Adam, or the red man, and woman, red, right? We find that the Hebrew language establishes that the words Adam, Adama, Adami, and Adama have all similar meaning. First, Adam, as above, signifies earthy man, red. Second, Adama signifies red earth or blood. Third, Adami signifies my man, red, earthy, human. Fourth, Adma signifies earthy, red, or bloody, all which words are of the same class and spring from the same root, which was Adam, signifying red or copper color. Again, red or copper color. We're just talking about copper colored races, right, of America. Webster's Dictionary, 1828. American, a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Again, copper colored races. From a view of this fact, it is difficult to account for the reason of the name of the first man and woman unless they were created red, instead of white or black, as it is well known that the Hebrew language is governed in its power of naming visible existences, as of animals, fowls, fishes, by their appearances or natures, and frequently by both, as in the case of the name Adam, which not only represents the hue of his skin, but that also of his intellectual existence or human nature. Thus, this Jewish historian, as well as the genius of the Hebrew language, furnishes us with a clue like the golden thread in the labyrinth of the subterranean palace of ancient Thebes, leading to the right conclusion on this subject, namely that Adam, with all the antediluvian race, were red or a copper color people. Again, that Adam and all the antediluvian race, or the people who lived before the flood, right? You were red or a copper colored people, and you still are. And regarding copper colored races, right? In the book, we got this in part 1 or 2 of the series, Crania Americana, a comparative view of skulls of various aboriginal nations of North and South America. In regards to the Inca, the Peruvians, down towards the bottom middle, it says their complexion is a dark brown and their hair long black and rather coarse. Down in the bottom, it says, to these observations of Clavigero may be added a few others from Humboldt, who describes them as possessing a swarthy and copper color. Again, a swarthy and copper color. Swarthy means black or dark skin, and copper color. And in another part of this book, it says here, now as the Jews are red or a dark copper colored race, a dark copper colored race, really? Because the Jews that they show us today, these Ashkenazi Jews, they don't look dark copper colored. All right, reading from this book called An Abridged History, Africa and Her People by Rudy Johnson. And it says here, Noah, whatever may have been the hue of his complexion, was the father of sons of very different complexions. Japhet most likely was the white one, and from him descended the Caucasian race, as we shall presently show, the fairest of the human races. So the Ashkenazi Jew, as we mentioned earlier, they come from Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz is the son of Gog, I believe, from Magog, but I believe it's Gog. And those are both sons of Japhet. They're not even Shem. The Hebrews come out of Shem. So these are not Hebrews that are in the state of Israel today. And the continuance says Shem was copper colored. Again, Shem was copper colored. Who also is copper colored? Here we go again. American, a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals or copper colored races found here by the Europeans. Alright, Shem was copper colored and the progenitor of the Hebrews and of the copper colored races. When the third son was presented to Noah, he exclaimed, Ham, sample black, for the signification of the Hebrew term means heat, hence black, and from Ham descended all the dark, complex races, as we shall see from the countries they inhabited and for which they were divinely adapted by color and constitution. From the book we have here, American Antiquities and Discoveries in the West by Joshua Priest. And it says here, but as it respects the complexions of these heads, now they're talking about Shem, Japheth, and Ham, of the nations of the earth, we remark as follows. Shem was undoubtedly a red or copper colored man. Again, Shem was undoubtedly a red or copper colored man, which was the complexion of all the antediluvians. This conclusion is drawn from the fact that the nations inhabiting the countries named as being settled or peopled by the descendants of Shem have always been and now are of that caste. We deem this fact as conclusive that such was also their progenitor. We're talking about the copper-colored races of America, right? Shem, as that the great and distinguishing features and complexion of nations changed not materially. Shem was the father of the Jewish race or Hebrews, who are of the same hue, varying, it is true, some being of a darker and some of a lighter shade, right? Different kinds of hues, this copper color, but all the same, right? Are arising from secret and undefinable principles placed beyond the research of man, and also from amalgamation by marriage with white and with the darker nations, as the African. So it's separate, right? Then the African, these copper-colored descendants of Shem, different. But to corroborate our opinion that the antediluvians were of red or copper complexion, we bring the well-known statement of Josephus that Adam, the first of men, was a red man, made of red earth, called virgin earth, because of its beauty and pureness. The word Adam, he also says, signifies that color which is red. Again, copper-colored races. It's here from the Sundervan Pictorial Bible Dictionary. I've actually found an original version of this in the archive.org website. All right. Again, the Sundervan Pictorial Bible Dictionary. General editor is Merrill C. Tini, Dean of the Graduate School of Theology, Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois. So we're in page 330. We're in the H's. Ham, right? It says the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood. And one of the 8 persons to live through the flood, he became the progenitor of the dark races, but not the Negroes. Again, very important, right? I know that kind of confuses a lot of people, all right? But like we've been trying to say, all skin folk ain't king folk, all right? Again, Ham, he is the progenitor of the dark races, but not the Negroes, all right? Not the Nagas, not the Negroes, not the copper-colored races in America, but of the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. His indecency when his father lay drunken brought a curse upon Canaan. All right. I know a lot of the people fight that because they're trying to say, oh, that's just like a white man to blame the only so-called Negro, right? As the one being cursed. But again, they're telling you straight up here that Ham, he is a progenitor of dark races, but not of the Negroes, the Nagas, the Negus, the Nagas, the kings, the priest kings. He's the progenitor of the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. All right. And one thing we have to know and dodge the hijack in is that we assume that Japheth was white, that Shem was, white like the white Israelites, and that Ham was the only Negro. And that's totally false.
Totally false. Or so that whole, oh, they're just trying to blame the dark skinned man and curse him. No, that's you're wrong. But again, Ham is the progenitor of the dark races, but not the Negroes. Not the Negroes. Yes, dark races, but not the Negroes. Doesn't mean, this is telling you straight up that not all dark skinned people in the world are related or of the same, nation, tribe, or whatever, or ancestor.
Black History Month you find
Ridiculous. Why? You're going to relegate my history to a month?
oh come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No,
Well,
come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
What do you think, Morgan? Is this political correctness gone too far?
Yeah. I mean, we have a tendency to do that anyway. I mean, you get politically correct. Stuff happens that you don't want to happen. I all of a sudden became an African. African American. I'm not African. American. I'm not African. American. I'm not African.
All right, and before I finish this video, I just want to read from the Facts on File Encyclopedia of Word and Phrase Origins, 4th edition, definitions and origins of more than 15,000 words and expressions. And let's go into it. This part right here where it says for the N-word, right? The N-word, right? When used by a white person to describe a black or African American person, this is probably the most offensive, hateful, hurtful term in the language today. And the N-word, right, has also been an offensive, derogatory term applied to Indians as well as blacks up until recent time. So I just wanted to leave you with that right there. So as you can see, the N-word, right, it was applied to Indians. This is from an encyclopedia, American Encyclopedia, all right? All right, now to corroborate with this, it says here from the historical quotes from Oxford Dictionary, 1861, and then it says here, a dark-skinned person of any origin. An early U.S. use, usually with reference to American Indians. All right, so you see where the N-word was used for first. It was used to in reference to American Indians. This is in the Oxford Dictionary, all right?
All right, so before we go into the historical accounts of what these early colonists, explorers, settlers, pilgrims, conquistadors saw, described as the characteristics of these aborigines or indigenous people they were encountering, the colors, how they were, their complexion, such as, copper colored. So, as we all know, if you don't know the color of copper, right, let's take a look at a few examples, right? Copper, we know that the penny is made out of copper, and even the old pennies were even a little bit darker. So it does make sense, when they say copper colored, who they're referencing, right? And we just need to use our senses for that. They also mention a lot, of course, brown skin. We know as well who is brown skin and what color usually the shades of brown are. We have a reference of as well as Swarti, and Swarti, basically the meaning of Swarti just means dark skin or black or a dark complexion. They're also the reference of the Aborigines being of cinnamon color, right? We know what that looks like as well, as well as the different shades of cinnamon, as you can see in this cinnamon color palette. And of course, we all know the term the red man, right? They used to call the Indians the red man, but when they're talking about red, they're really basically talking almost copper or a brownish red, not red like an apple or red like a red rose, but they're talking about that mahogany, right? Cinnamon, copper color, kind of red. And I wanted to read something to you here from New York Times regarding the color Crayola had called Indian red. So it says here, chestnut replaces a color Crayola called Indian red. From New York Times, July 27, 1999. After sifting through more than 250,000 suggested names, Crayola has renamed its reddish brown crayon to avoid misunderstandings over the color's origin. The color Indian red, which Crayola said was based on reddish brown pigment commonly found near India, was dropped because teachers complained students thought it described the skin color of American Indians. So you see how they're trying to like bullshit that they're trying to say that it resembles something in India. But we know exactly what they meant when they named this Crayola Indian red. Look at the color, it's almost brown, right? Continuing, it says the new name will appear on 15 million crayons each year beginning in September. It is only the third time in the company's 96-year history that a color has been changed. Only the third time. So why is this so controversial? And why did they have to change it? They knew eventually you would wake up and notice and put two and two together. Nearly 100,000 people from age 3 to 90 submitted names, including 155 people who suggested chestnut. Other popular suggestions included red clay, clay red, and Mars red. Others rejected names included ginger spice, crab claw red, old penny, there you go, old penny, and baseball mitt. One person even suggested the crayon formerly known as Indian red in honor of the rock musician formerly known as Prince. Just wanted to share this book with you. I know this image goes around the internet a lot, so I wanted to share the source for that. I'm going to show you something in this book real quick. Smith's Geography. Geography on the productive system for schools, academies, and families, revised and improved, accompanied by a large and valuable atlas by Roswell C. Smith, author of Introductory Arithmetic, Practical and Mental Arithmetic, the Productive Grammar. And this is from 1839. So on page 78 of this atlas, Geography, again from 1839, so we got to dodge the hijack a little bit, but it says here races of men, right? Who were the first inhabitants on this earth? And it starts out with Adam and Eve, of course. Here it always goes back to biblical stuff when talking about the origin of humans. That's what all these anthropological books go back to. So they're saying the Garden of Eden is where it's supposed to be, right? Dodge the hijack. America's the true old world. But what I wanted to show you is to start talking about the so-called white race, the European race, skin more or less white. What does that mean? Remember the dodge the hijack. But on page 79, it starts talking about the Asiatic or Mongolian races, as you see here, of a deep yellow color. Their hair black, stiff, straight, and rather thin. But you guys can see they did paint them a little dark. What I find interesting is how they depict the American Indian here. As you guys can see, it says, what is the third race? All right, so again, touch the hijack with their whole race thing. But it says here, the American or Indian race found only in America is of a deep copper color. Copper-colored tribes of America. You see how they're depicting it? Dark skin, right? Straight black hair, high cheekbones, eyes black and sunken, large faces, and robust bodies. This race comprises all the American Indians except the Eskimo, who belongs to the Asiatic race. All right, so even though they kind of generalizing, they do know the deep copper color. You already know. You put a penny and compare it to your complexion. And I would just add that not all American Indians had straight hair, but yes, many did. We had all kinds of phenotypes here, all types of hair, and many shades of the deep copper color, from the lightest copper to the darkest copper. And also what they have down here, as you guys can see, is a separation of the African and the American. You see, two different type of so-called dark skin or so-called Negro people. Even in this atlas from 1839, it says here the African or Negro race, such the hijack. So now he's not Negro. So what do you mean? You are depicting him as a so-called Negro. Deep copper color, we already know what that means. There is no such thing as a black skin. Dodge the hijack, deep brown too. So they're saying that only people in Africa had woolly hair and thick lips, and that's not true. We've shown that that was here too in ancient America. But I just found it interesting that, they depicted two different type of dark-skinned people. They're not the same. The American and the African, not the same. Copper-colored tribes of America.
African Indian, Unish Inaba. The whole subject complete in one volume, illustrated with numerous appropriate engravings by Elijah M. Haynes, and this is what they show. And it says that this is written in 18. So what I wanted to show is in this part of the book, start reading here, it says, a general description of the Indian tells us that the aboriginal of America, again, the aboriginal, not a Native American, the aboriginal of America is tall, straight of stature and muscular, having coarse black hair, coarse, well-formed limbs, deep chest, brown or copper-colored complexion, again, brown or copper-colored complexion, head a little flat, prominent nose, compressed lips, dark eyes, and possessed of great power of endurance. In regard to the complexion of the American Indian, Father Charlevoix says, the color of the savages does not prove a third species between the white and the black, as some people have imagined. They are very swarthy. Swarthy, that means dark-skinned or so-called black, and of a dirty, dark red, ruddy, dark red, copper-colored, which appears more in Florida, of which Louisiana is a part. You see? So Florida was most of the southeast. I've told you this many times. I showed you the maps. Florida was basically the southeast of the United States, not just the state of Florida like we think today. It was big. All right, Louisiana was a part of Florida. All right, so even Louisiana, they were very what? The people in Louisiana were what? The native, the Indians, the aboriginals were very swarthy, dark, and a dirty dark red. I want to show you the British Crown with a glance at their customs, characteristics, and history by William Clint, read before the Society, 23rd of March, 1878. All right, I'm going to go to this part of the book, and it says, the face was broad and flat, with high cheekbones, more rounded and arched than in the Allied type, without having the visage expanded to the same breadth. The forehead was generally low and narrow, the eyes deep, small, and of a dark or light hazel color, the nose rather diminutive but prominent, with wide nostrils, prominent nose, wide nostrils, the mouth large and lips thick, large mouth and thick lips, the expression stern and fierce. The stature through variable and different parts of the continent was in the country we now inhabit generally above the middle size in the men, though the women were usually below that standard, a fact which may probably be ascribed to the drudgery they were obliged to undergo. The color of the skin was red or copper-colored, copper-colored, a red or copper-colored, not red, right? Red man, they really mean copper-colored, all right? So we're going to get into this book, The Indians of the Southeastern United States by John R. Swanton, okay? Classics of Smithsonian Anthropology, all right?
And it says here, the traveler and botanist William Bartram was of somewhat romantic type, and his conclusions differ from those of Swan accordingly. In the appendix of the first London edition of his travels, he has the following general account of the Southern Indians.
The males of the Cherokees, Muskogees, Seminoles, Chickasaws, Choctaws, and Confederate tribes of the Creeks are tall, erect, and moderately robust, their limbs well shaped, so as generally to form a perfect human figure, their features regular and countenance open, dignified and placid, yet the forehead and brow so formed as to strike you instantly with heroism and bravery, the eye though rather small yet active and full of fire, the iris always black, and the nose commonly inclining to the aquiline. Their countenance and actions exhibit an air of magnanimity,
superiority, and independence. Their complexion of a reddish brown or copper color tribes of America. All right, reddish brown, copper color. Their hair long, lank, and coarse, and black as raven, and reflecting the light luster at different exposures to the light. Says the Muskogees are in stature nearly equal to the Cherokees, have fine features and are every way handsome men. Their noses are very often aquiline. They are well limbed, countenances upright, and their eyes brisk and fiery, but their complexions are of a dark copper color. All right, dark copper color. So if I show a dark copper colored Indian on the thumbnail, am I blackwashing, as people say, when they're being described this way? Complexions are of a dark copper color. It says, coming down to the Seminole Indians of Florida as observed by Macaulay 50 years ago, it is interesting to note the repetition of some comments made by much earlier writers, such as that referring to the small stature of the Creek women. Now it says, physically both men and women are remarkable. The men as a rule attract attention by their height, fullness and symmetry of development, and the regularity and agreeableness of their features. In muscular power and constitutional ability to endure they excel. While these qualities distinguish with a few exceptions the men of the whole tribe, they are particularly characteristic of the two most widely spread of the families of which the tribe is composed. These are the Tiger and the Otter clans, which part of their lines of descent have been preserved through a long and tragic past with exceptional freedom from admixture with degrading blood. Today, their men might be taken as types of physical excellence. The physique of every tiger warrior, especially, I met with furnished proof of this statement. The tigers are of dark, copper-colored fellows, over 6 feet in height, with limbs in good proportion. Dark copper, guys, okay? A specific copper, right? Because many shades of copper, but they tell you dark copper colored man, copper colored tribes of America.